Whiteout on Route 12. The blizzard was not on the forecast when Mark Reynolds left Sioux Falls that night. At least, not the kind that kills. The radio mentioned light snow, nothing more. Route 12 stretched ahead like a black ribbon swallowed by darkness. Mark adjusted the heater, thinking only about getting home to his wife. 10 minutes later, snow began falling sideways, thick and aggressive, slamming into the windshield like handfuls of sand. Cell service dropped without warning. The road disappeared. Within minutes, visibility dropped to nothing. Mark slowed to 20 miles an hour, heart pounding. Snow piled fast, erasing lane markings. Wind rocked the truck hard enough to make it drift. He tried the radio again, only static. Then the engine light flickered. Mark cursed under his breath. He considered turning back but couldn't see where the road ended or began. The world outside his windshield became a spinning white wall, endless and suffocating. The truck died without warning. One moment the engine growled, the next, silence. The sudden quiet was worse than the storm. Mark slammed the steering wheel. He tried restarting it. Nothing. Snow packed against the doors instantly, like the storm was alive and hunting. He remembered something he'd heard once: don't leave your vehicle in a blizzard. But the cold was already seeping inside, biting his fingers through gloves. Mark wrapped himself in a blanket from the back seat and waited. Minutes felt like hours. The cold crept deeper, numbing his feet. Then he heard it, a knock. Soft. 3 taps on the driver's side window. Mark froze. No one should have been out there. He wiped frost from the glass. Nothing. Just snow. Then another knock. Louder this time. Followed by something scraping slowly along the side of the truck. "Hello." Mark shouted, his voice shaking. The storm answered back with a scream of wind. The scraping moved to the passenger door. Metal groaned. His breath came out in short, panicked gasps. He told himself it was debris. Ice. Anything but footsteps. Then he saw it. Shadows moving against the snow, tall and uneven. The handle on the passenger door twitched once. Twice. Mark grabbed the emergency flare from the glove box and cracked it alive. Red light exploded inside the cab. Outside, the shadows vanished instantly. The knocking stopped. Silence returned, thick and unnatural. His relief lasted seconds. The flare began melting snow inside, releasing steam that fogged the windows. He realized the oxygen was dropping. Carbon monoxide wasn't his killer tonight. Hypothermia was. His phone buzzed suddenly. 1 bar of service. A text came through, from an unknown number. "Do not open the door." Mark stared at the screen. His fingers trembled violently. He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. Outside, footsteps returned. Slow, deliberate circles around the truck. Each step crunched deep in snow. The footsteps stopped behind the truck. Then came breathing. Loud. Wet. Right behind the rear window. Mark couldn't bring himself to look. The cold was stealing his strength now, his thoughts slowing. He slumped sideways, vision tunneling. The breathing turned into whispering, words he couldn't understand. Names, maybe. Or prayers. Or warnings meant too late. When Mark woke, the world was quiet. No wind. No footsteps. Just pale morning light leaking through snow-packed windows. Rescue sirens wailed in the distance. A plow operator had spotted his buried truck by accident. Mark survived, barely. But when police reviewed the scene, they found something strange. Footprints. Leading to the truck. But none leading away. Officials called it disorientation. Animal tracks, maybe. But Mark knows better. He still gets texts from unknown numbers during snowstorms. Always the same message. Do not open the door. And every winter, when blizzards hit the Midwest, people vanish on empty roads. Vehicles found silent, doors frozen shut, footprints ending in the snow. Mark spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from severe hypothermia. Doctors said he was lucky. But luck didn't explain the frostbite patterns on his hands. Marks shaped like fingers gripping him too tightly. When he asked the nurse if anyone else had been rescued that night, her smile faded. "No," she said. "Just you." Outside his window, snow fell quietly, gentle now, as if nothing terrible had happened at all. A state trooper visited Mark on the 4th day. He brought photos from the scene. The truck. The footprints. The trooper admitted something wasn't right. The footprints were barefoot. No shoes. No socks. And they circled the truck for nearly an hour, according to drift patterns. People don't survive 10 minutes out there. the trooper said quietly. Especially not barefoot. Mark was discharged just before another storm rolled in. He tried to ignore the unease crawling under his skin. At home, his wife noticed he flinched at every wind gust. That night, the power went out. The house went silent. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Still alive. Mark dropped the phone like it burned. The storm worsened. Snow piled against the windows. Mark checked the locks twice. Then 3 knocks echoed from the front door. Soft. Patient. His wife asked who it was. Mark couldn't answer. The knocks came again. Same rhythm as before. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps. He whispered, "Don't open it." Outside, a voice spoke through the wind. "Mark, it's cold." His wife stepped back, terrified. Mark grabbed the fireplace poker and stood shaking. The voice continued, changing. Older, younger, wrong. It mimicked his father's voice next. Then his own. "Please," it begged. "I'm freezing." The doorknob turned slightly, even though it was locked. Frost began creeping inward across the wood. Mark remembered something the trooper said before leaving. Blizzards mess with people's heads. But this wasn't confusion. This was intentional. He screamed for it to leave. The knocking stopped instantly. Silence returned. When he looked through the window, nothing stood there, except barefoot footprints leading up to the door. Again, none leading away. The next morning, the news reported 3 abandoned vehicles found along Route 12 after the storm. Engines off. Doors unopened. No bodies. Mark knew the road. He drove it every week. He stared at the screen as one reporter said something that made his blood run cold. Witnesses reported knocking sounds on their vehicles during the storm. Mark tried to move on. Months passed. Spring came. Snow melted. But the messages never stopped. Always during storms. Always short. Don't let it in. Sometimes, late at night, he heard wind scrape along the house like fingers on metal. Sometimes, he swore something stood just beyond the porch light, waiting patiently for winter to return. 1 year later, another blizzard hit, worse than the first. Mark refused to drive. Roads closed. Sirens wailed non-stop. Near midnight, the knocking returned. Louder this time. Angry. The voice no longer pretended. It snarled through the door, "You left me." The temperature inside dropped fast. Frost crept across the walls like veins. Mark lit every light in the house. The knocking became pounding. Windows cracked from the cold. His phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. Open the door or freeze. Mark understood then. The storm wasn't random. It followed survivors. It wanted witnesses back. He screamed into the wind, "I won't open it." When morning came, the storm vanished. The house stood untouched. No footprints. No frost. Just silence. Authorities later confirmed something disturbing. Satellite images showed a human-shaped heat signature circling Mark's house all night. Standing still. Waiting. In sub-zero temperatures. Impossible for anything living. Mark moved south after that. Somewhere with no snow. No blizzards. But every winter, news reports still mention Route 12. Cars stranded. Knocking sounds. Footprints that end abruptly. And sometimes, survivors receive texts from numbers that don't exist, warning them not to open the door. Experts say extreme cold causes hallucinations. But hallucinations don't text you. They don't leave footprints. And they don't wait patiently for winter. Whatever walks during blizzards doesn't want to kill you fast. It wants you to choose. Open the door, or let the cold finish what it started. The last call from mile marker 47, the call came in at 2:14 a.m., right as the blizzard reached its worst. Dispatcher Emily Carter almost missed it. Static drowned most signals that night. The GPS ping showed mile marker 47, a stretch of Wyoming highway locals avoided in winter. The man on the line was calm. Too calm. "My car won't start," he said. "I can see something walking in the snow." Then the line crackled violently. Emily asked him to stay in the vehicle. That's protocol. He agreed immediately. Too quickly. Wind screamed through the receiver, then went quiet. "It's knocking," the man said softly. Emily froze. Dispatch logs from past storms mentioned the same word. Knocking. She asked if he could see anyone. There was a pause. Then he whispered, "It's not a person." People don't move like that. State troopers were already overwhelmed. Rescue would take at least an hour. Emily stayed on the line, listening to his breathing slow. He described footprints forming outside his car, bare, deep, appearing one by one. "It's standing in front of my headlights," he said. "It doesn't have a face." Emily told him not to open the door. He laughed quietly. "It already knows that." The knocking started again. Louder now. Metal rang through the call. Emily heard it clearly. 3 knocks, always 3. She asked his name. Another pause. "I don't think that matters anymore," he replied. The temperature sensor from his car transmitted automatically. -31 degrees Fahrenheit. No human could survive outside longer than minutes. Yet something stood there, waiting. Emily heard a second voice then, faint, distorted. It sounded like a woman crying. The man began breathing faster. "It sounds like my wife," he said. "But she's been dead for 6 years." Emily's hand shook. The second voice begged softly, repeating his name. Dispatch software flagged the call as unstable. Snow interference spiked violently. "No matter what you hear, don't open the door," Emily begged. The man went silent. Then, very calmly, he said, "It's smiling now." Emily heard scraping, slow movement across the hood of the car. Frost spread inward on the windshield, forming shapes like veins. The crying outside turned into laughter. Low. Wet. Wrong. Emily screamed for him to stay awake. He replied, "It's offering warmth." The knocking stopped. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Then the door creaked. Emily shouted his name, but the line filled with roaring wind. The call disconnected at exactly 2:27 a.m. Rescue reached mile marker 47 just before dawn. They found the car half buried. Engine cold. Doors locked from the inside. No sign of struggle. No body. But inside the car, frost coated only one seat. The driver's door was warm to the touch, despite the cold. Bare footprints circled the car endlessly. Emily reviewed the recording later. There was something she hadn't noticed live. Under the man's voice, another sound. Breathing that didn't match his rhythm. Slow. Patient. And at the very end, just before disconnection, a whisper came through the static. She told him not to open it. Emily quit dispatch 2 weeks later. Every winter since, calls come from mile marker 47 during blizzards. Same calm voice. Same knocking. Same ending. Troopers now avoid that stretch during storms. Locals say if you break down there and hear knocking, don't answer. The cold isn't the most dangerous thing waiting outside. Emily tried to forget the call. But winter has a way of dragging memories back to the surface. 1 year later, during another Wyoming blizzard, her phone rang at 2:14 a.m. exactly the same time. Unknown number. When she answered, she heard static and her own voice saying, "Stay in the vehicle." Emily dropped the phone. The line stayed open, breathing softly. The next morning, Emily drove to the dispatch center, despite having quit. Old co-workers looked shaken. That night, 3 calls had come in from mile marker 47. All different voices. All describing the same thing. Knocking. Footsteps. A face just beyond the headlights. One caller screamed that it was wearing his wife's voice like a mask. Emily asked to hear the archived recordings. The supervisor hesitated, then agreed. The first call played normally. The second sounded distorted. On the third, Emily noticed something impossible. Under the caller's voice was hers, whispering instructions she didn't remember giving. "Do not open the door," her voice said calmly. Over and over. A retired trooper overheard the playback. He told Emily something no one wrote in reports. Mile marker 47 used to be a mass grave during the winter of 1888, the schoolhouse blizzard. Dozens froze while trying to reach shelter. Survivors reported hearing familiar voices calling them into the snow. "Some things learn," the trooper said, "and some winters never end." That night, Emily dreamed of snow filling her lungs. She stood on the highway, barefoot, knocking on glass she couldn't see through. Inside the car, someone begged her not to open the door. She woke screaming. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. "Your shift starts at 2:14. Emily didn't answer the next call, but voicemail recorded it anyway. The message was wind, knocking, then her own voice whispering, "Help me." She realized the truth too late. The thing at mile marker 47 wasn't just luring victims. It was copying survivors. Wearing them. learning their voices until no warning could be trusted. During the next blizzard, Emily drove anyway, straight to mile marker 47. She parked with headlights on. Snow swallowed the road instantly. Knocking began within minutes. 3 taps. She didn't look. She didn't answer. She spoke instead, into the storm. "You won't use my voice again." The knocking stopped. For the first time, silence followed. Then something screamed. Not human, not animal. The sound tore through the wind and vanished. When rescue arrived, Emily was still alive. Barely. There were footprints around her car, but they were retreating, leading away. Calls from mile marker 47 stopped after that winter. Locals say the road is quiet now, but Emily knows better. Every storm needs a voice. And sometimes, late at night, she hears knocking on her walls, soft, patient, waiting for her to answer and give it back what it lost. Experts say extreme cold causes shared hallucinations. But hallucinations don't leave footprints. And they don't learn names. When blizzards come to Wyoming now, emergency crews tell one rule to stranded drivers. If you hear someone knocking and calling your name, do not answer, even if it sounds exactly like someone you trust. The shelter that never opened, the emergency shelter was supposed to save them. That's what the sign said, Winter Storm Shelter, open during blizzards. When the interstate shut down, 12 travelers followed the blinking arrow lights off the highway. Snow swallowed their cars as soon as they parked. The building ahead was dark, silent, and buried halfway under drifts. Someone knocked on the steel door. No answer. The wind howled like a living thing. Phones had no signal. The temperature dropped fast. A man in a straitjacket insisted the shelter was staffed. "It always is," he said. He banged harder on the door. 3 knocks. The sound echoed too loudly. From somewhere inside, something knocked back. 3 taps. Perfectly timed. Everyone froze. A woman laughed nervously. "Probably the caretaker," she said. But no one opened the door. The knocking inside came again. Slow, patient. Another voice joined it. A child's voice. Crying. Begging to be let out. One of the travelers stepped forward, hand shaking, when the man in the jacket grabbed him. "That's not how shelters work," he whispered. Snow began to bury their ankles. Time blurred. The child's crying turned into coughing. Then into laughter. Inside the shelter, something dragged itself across metal flooring. The sound vibrated through the door. The man in the jacket said quietly, "This shelter closed in 1996. People froze inside when the exit jammed." A radio crackled to life inside the shelter. Emergency alerts played on loop. Warnings from decades ago. Names were listed. One of them matched a woman standing in the snow. She screamed. The door handle twitched from the inside. Frost raced outward across the steel, spreading toward their hands like veins. The wind shifted suddenly. Headlights appeared through the whiteout, another car arriving. The driver stepped out, confused, and walked straight toward the shelter. The group shouted for him to stop. He didn't react. His eyes were glassy, calm. He raised his hand and knocked 3 times on the door. The shelter door opened a crack. Warm air rushed out. The driver smiled and stepped forward. The man in the jacket tackled him into the snow, slamming the door shut again. Something inside screamed, many voices at once. The sound cracked the metal. Snow fell from the roof like ash. The man in the jacket revealed the truth. He'd worked rescue for 30 years. Every few winters, this shelter tried to open itself. It learned voices, learned names, learned how to sound warm. "It doesn't want to save you," he said. "It wants you inside." The blizzard worsened. The shelter began calling out individually now, perfect copies of loved ones' voices. One woman dropped to her knees crying. Snow buried the cars completely. Survival meant one thing, leaving, walking into the storm, away from warmth, away from the door. They walked, single file, following the rescuer's flashlight into nothing. Behind them, the shelter screamed as the door slammed itself shut. Rescue found 8 survivors at dawn. 4 vanished. Officials blamed exposure. But the shelter still stands, dark, buried, waiting for the next blizzard to make it knock. The 4 who vanished were listed as missing for only 48 hours. After that, officials quietly changed their status to presumed deceased. No search teams were sent back to the shelter once the storm cleared. Roads reopened. Traffic returned. But the man in the state jacket, his name was Calvin Morse, went back alone. He parked a mile away and walked the rest of the distance through untouched snow. Calvin found no bodies outside, no tracks leading away, just 4 new sets of footprints circling the shelter door, barefoot, uneven, frozen mid-step. They ended inches from the steel. He placed his gloved hand against the door. It was warm. Not from sunlight. From inside. Calvin stepped back immediately and radioed headquarters. Static answered. The next blizzard hit 2 weeks later. Emergency lines flooded with calls directing stranded drivers toward the shelter. Dispatchers swore the tips came from survivors of the previous storm. Names matched. Voices matched. But phone records showed those numbers hadn't existed in years. Calvin tried to warn them. His reports were buried. His recordings classified. A superior told him plainly, if people think shelters aren't safe, they'll panic. That winter, 7 more travelers vanished near the same exit. The shelter door was found open afterward. No footprints leading in. None leading out. During the final storm of the season, Calvin returned one last time. Snow blinded him within seconds. The shelter lights were on now. Warm yellow. Inviting. He heard his wife's voice from inside. She had died 10 years earlier. She laughed softly and said, "You did your job. Come inside." Calvin dropped to his knees in the snow. He pressed his hands over his ears and screamed until his throat bled. The door began knocking from the inside. 3 times, then 3 more. The warmth reached him. Frost retreated. His radio crackled alive with one final message in his own voice. Shelter open. At dawn, plows found Calvin's truck abandoned. Engine cold. Keys inside. No body. No tracks. Inside the shelter, responders found 4 new emergency cots neatly arranged. Each had a name tag. Calvin's was already filled out. The shelter was demolished the following spring. Officially, it never existed. But drivers still report GPS reroutes during blizzards, directions leading to an empty stretch of road where nothing stands. And sometimes, if you roll down your window, you can hear knocking carried on the wind. 3 taps. Waiting for you to answer. Subscribe now, because the next story might happen on your road. Comment "Stay in the vehicle" if you made it to the end. Like this video, so you're not alone when the cold comes back.